In my last video, I talked about when and where to use specific types of line in the three majors, being fluorocarbon, monofilament, and braided lines. Then I got asked a question online, and it was more about how often should you change them, and it's a great question. And there's no finite answer. I can't give you a definitive answer because there's a lot of variables that are going to affect the length of the use you'll get out of fluorocarbon and mono especially. You know, if you go right to braid, the great thing about braid is despite it being more expensive initially, the beauty of braided line is that it'll last an incredibly long time because it doesn't have memory. The biggest killer in fishing line is the fact that it has memory. When it's been sitting on your spool for a long time, you kind of get that old nasty, and we've all seen it. You've seen it, you pull your line off and it does this. That tells you it's been sitting on there a long time. Now you can, if it's fresh line that's just been sitting, stretch it out and it will relax itself quite a bit. Or you can try to use a line and lure conditioner, which I personally have absolutely zero experience with, but from all the reports I've seen, some people say it does help with casting distance and it does relax the line. So hey, listen, if it's working for you, go for it. But for me, when I'm using fluorocarbons, there's two things that are gonna make me change it. One is if I'm fighting a lot of heavy fish or throwing a lot of big baits like big swim baits or big crankbaits. If I'm stressing that line out consistently, I'm gonna change it relatively often, so maybe every couple weeks. The other thing, which is an immediate change for fluorocarbon, is if you happen to bird's nest it and get that one kink in there. As soon as fluorocarbon actually physically kinks in a knot, it's its weak point. It doesn't like being bent. So for me, if I bird's nest or I kink one of my lines, I automatically put that reel with the fluorocarbon down and remember to change it when I get home. Now when it comes to monofilament, you know, the one thing that I could say is bad about mono is the fact that it will absorb water or moisture. So using it for a long extended period of time, it will do that. Water quality will also degrade it and its castability. Both fluoro and mono, if you're fishing a lot of dirty water, that film will stick to it and affect its performance. If it has gotten too much memory, typically I change them out because I like that flow in the casting. I like it to be smooth and new line. One of the biggest problems I see with people, whether it's braid, fluorocarbon, or monofilament, is they complain about its performance, but a lot of it has to do with what pound test you're putting on what kind of reel. If you're talking about bait casters, I always try to tell people with fluoro and mono, they work best from 10, 12, 14, all the way up to 20, 25 pound test because of their level wind. They're gonna actually put that line on and the diameter is not gonna affect the performance. When it comes to braid on a bait caster, I like going heavier than 30, so 40, 50, 65, even 80 pound works great. And the reason I go heavier on the braid on bait caster is because when you go below that 30, 20, 15, the diameter is so thin, and because it winds on level, a lot of times when you set the hook, it's gonna cut in and it'll actually bind on itself. So using 40, 50, 65, and 80 is a thicker diameter line and it stops it from doing that. Now spinning, a lot of people complain about fluorocarbon and how it works on spinning reels. Well, spinning reels, because the line comes in and turns 90 degrees onto the spool, you gotta have a softer line. Smaller diameter means softer. So I always tell people, you know, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, whatever pound fluorocarbon or mono you wanna use down to 2 pound test or 1 pound test, in the case of pan fishing, great on spinning reels. And when it comes to braid, the same plays. You don't want 30 pound braid on a spinning reel. What you want to do is run 20 or 15, or for myself, I run only 2 braids on my spinning reels. I run 10 and I run 5. And the reason being, in my finesse applications, that 5 pound has 1 pound diameter. I can put a whole bunch on a small reel and I can still handle a lot of fish with a fluorocarbon leader. And on my bigger 2500 and 3000 size, I run 10 pound braid. And that 10 pound I can run with a fluoro leader. I can cast it, it's got 2 pound test diameter. It works great, it's got 0 stretch. And like I said, when it comes to braid, this braid's been on this reel for probably 3 years. You can see it's got 0 memory. That's why braid is great. It's a great initial investment on both bait casting and spinning. It'll last a super long time. And all you gotta do is change out your fluorocarbon or your mono leaders. But if you're doing techniques, and there are a lot of them that require fluorocarbon or mono, keep an eye on your line. If you're stressing it, dirty water conditions, lots of sun, breaking down through the UV, or kinking them on casts, change them out. Could be every week, could be every month. I probably wouldn't let it go much more than that because the memory will be your worst enemy and it'll affect casting distance and it'll even affect knot strength. Hopefully that helps you guys out. That's my breakdown on how often you should change your line. I know it's a lot of information, but I'll keep going with these videos and breaking down simple things that, you know, for a lot of us, we take for granted, but for some who are starting out, it's a great way to get them on board, catching more fish and having more fun fishing.